Well, I read a very prescient piece today by the ever so insightful Patrick J. Buchanan, talking about all of this recent, fluff and huff and puff on the part of the U.S. regarding China and the Chinese government and what they've been doing in various parts of the world, in Xinjiang, where the Uyghurs live, and also in the South China Sea. And I have to say, it's always refreshing reading Pat, because most people, these past couple days are very much falling in line with the narrative set out by Bill Barr and Mike Pompeo, who seem to, obviously, are coordinating their sort of rebukes of China, I guess you could say, that they came out and gave this week. They both gave these big speeches where they were talking about how bad China is and all these bad things they're doing, and how somebody has to rein them in, and it was very ominous. And of course, it gave everyone chills of Cold War II. That's what people are starting to talk about now, because essentially Barr and Pompeo are drawing the line and saying either you're with us or against us, and everyone's saying, yeah, China's bad, and of course China's bad. Just about everybody accepts that, except for some folks who are literal China shills. But just because China's bad doesn't mean that you have to accept or agree with what Mike Pompeo and Bill Barr are talking about, because what they're saying is some pretty extreme stuff. They're talking about retaliating against China in some real way, in perhaps engaging in conflict with them. And it sounds like they're talking about something a little more serious than even what I've discussed in the past. That being a break in economic relations with China, which I think would be disastrous for the United States. As I've said before, the cheap Chinese goods are what keeps the standard of living in the United States so high. If we lost access to cheap Chinese goods, then we would be hurt much more than the Chinese would. But now things have escalated much quicker. People aren't just talking about that; they're talking about actual conflict, because Pompeo, as Pat Buchanan points out, is going very hard on this South China Sea issue, saying how China is violating the sovereignty of all these other countries, Vietnam, Brunei, the Philippines, and what have you, in the South China Sea, and claiming these little rocks and making reefs and islands and putting airstrips on them so they can claim them as territory. And of course, they have this 9-dash line, which looks really silly on the official map of China now. The map of China depicts, the map of mainland China that everyone knows, and then there is a 9-dashed line which sort of encircles the South China Sea, and it shows, oh, well, this is also a part of China. Looks kind of funny. Obviously, it's absurd. But is that really something that the United States wants to be going, to war over? We are, sending our ships into the Pacific. Of course, our ships never left the Pacific. Our ships have been in the Pacific, I guess you could say since the 19th century, but we've been dominating the Pacific since the end of World War II and the defeat of the Japanese, the last great Asian naval power. And so now, with the Chinese swirling around in the South China Sea, the U.S. seems to be interested in knocking them down a peg. And Pat asks a very fair question, and it's that, has anybody ever really thought this through? Does anyone with a depression and a global pandemic going on, does the U.S. really want to get involved in a naval war with the Chinese? Has anyone considered really what that means? I mean, let's just take into account, the stress in terms of resources that would sap away from our domestic economy when we're already having shortages and things from the shutdowns and whatnot across the country, which I've talked about this week. Nobody, when they get, being hawkish and talking aggressive about these other countries, it's very easy to say that these other countries are bad and that their governments do bad things, because, believe it or not, if you're running a government, you're probably doing some pretty bad stuff. And somebody who doesn't like you can point to those bad things and say, boy, you're the worst person on earth. And pretty much any reasonable person will have to nod their head and go like, yeah, that's some pretty bad stuff you're pointing out there. Genocide and, forced abortions, forced sterilization, and then in the case of the South China Sea, just sort of conquering other people, trying to control the Pacific Ocean, which of course the U.S. controls the Pacific Ocean, so you could make the argument that the U.S. is a little hypocritical for criticizing China, and I would certainly think that. But taking the U.S. out of this equation, if Vietnam and Philippines and all these, really did control their own territorial waters, and then China just started sending their boats in there and saying these are our waters, that wouldn't be very nice. But given that, does that justify all of the costs that would have to be, bore by Americans and by the American military and all that? Is any of that really worth it? It's very easy, of course, to say that Saddam Hussein was a bad guy, but is there anybody who thinks that the Iraq War was worth the cost? I mean, this is why, before a war starts, people generally are overwhelmingly in favor of it, and after the war, people are overwhelmingly opposed to it. Because it's very easy to focus on all the reasons why you should go to war. But once you're actually engulfed in the war, it's very hard to avoid all the reasons why you should have not gone to war. Oh, and let's not forget that China is a nuclear power, and so it's pretty much impossible for the U.S. to actually go to war with China. That's just absurd, because we would be nuking each other, and we don't want thermonuclear war. And you could say, oh, well, but come on, the Chinese aren't unreasonable people. They wouldn't just nuke America because, they want to survive. And they know that we have more nukes than them, and so it wouldn't make sense for them to try and, destroy us that way. We have mutually assured destruction, so neither side will use their nukes, and we'll just fight a normal conventional war. Well, it's easy to say that at the beginning, but if you ever get down to it where you actually get close to defeating the Chinese, and the Chinese government knows that, if we don't win this war, we're going to fall, and we're going to probably be, tried for war crimes or for genocide or whatever, crimes against humanity, and, the government in China that replaces us, that's propped up by the U.S., is not going to be very favorable to us. All of us leading government will be implicated for whatever crimes, and we will be executed. And so those people at the top probably will think, you know what, I'm going to risk, pressing the button and sending over those nukes if it means that it gives us one little chance of hanging on. Okay, so that's why nukes are there. It's for when the government gets desperate. Obviously, if China was winning the war, they wouldn't want to use their nukes. And the same is true of the U.S. It's the loser that you have to worry about using their nukes. So all this talk about getting more aggressive with China, I don't like it. I don't like it one bit. I don't like the idea that people think that a war with China is somehow reasonable, that is in any way justified, if only for the reason of the nukes. But beyond that, economically, it would be a disaster for the United States, and we're already in very, very bad economic shape, as I've been outlining. I think that it is... I think that it is absolutely certain that if these people got their war that they want with China, that the U.S. would not survive such a conflict. I'm not saying the Chinese would win. All I'm saying is that the U.S. Would definitely lose in the end. It might be that they defeat the Chinese. It might be that both sides are decimated. But either way, the U.S. government cannot survive if they put their people through that much trauma. And so all the people who are cheering this on and thinking, oh yeah, China, they're so bad. Boy, but China's bad. Somebody's got to rein them in. We got to do something. It's just like all the gun controllers. The pro-war crowd are a lot like them. They say like, oh, but a bunch of kids got shot in Sandy Hook. We got to do something. What, you don't want to do anything? Do you want kids getting shot? What? Do you want Uyghurs getting sterilized? Do you want their babies being aborted? Do you want people getting sent to concentration camps? Well, if you don't like concentration camps, you must love war with China. That's not how any of this works. That's a problem with democracy in general, to be honest, and not to get off on a tangent, but I mean, you have one-dimensional thinkers making, the decisions on who we elect. I mean, this is just a classic story of the seen and the unseen. Before you start a war, what you see is all the bad stuff that happens if China is left alone to their own devices. But what you don't see is everything that will happen if the U.S. tries to intervene. You see, we look back, and before 2003, we look at Saddam Hussein's Iraq, and you think, it wasn't a great place to live. But then you look at Iraq after Saddam Hussein, and you think, boy, hell of a lot worse after Saddam went away. And so I think that the popular warmongers need to take a step back and really consider, what exactly it is that they want to do in this situation. What exactly they're prepared to do. What does standing up to China mean? So I guess that's about all I have to say. If you get anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.